This is take two, which is not surprising. I'm making this a video instead of a written letter for two reasons. One is that my exasperation is still with me and typing is long and arduous. And two, I need something with a little more emotion this time. Unlike Jane Austen or Churchill or President Obama, I'm not that good with the written word. So I'll try to do this with my voice and with my face. Although with the exasperation, the face isn't looking that good either with the droopy eye and the tilted head, but we'll give it a try. And the try I'm going to give is once again to explain why I believe that the people in control of Israel are intentionally committing genocide against the Palestinian people. So let me run through this one time, and if you find it boring, then by all means leave. And if you find it offensive, you might want to watch it. If for no other reason than it makes sense to watch those that disagree with you, humbly disagree with you, and are willing to argue and debate about it, or at least debate, not argue. Now, first off, this did not start on October 7th. This started way back in the late 19th century when a new Zionist movement was started, and Britain, at that time known as Great Britain, because its empire, the sun never set on it. It was the biggest empire the world's ever known, as far as I'm aware. And they decided they needed a friendly face in the Middle East. And a gentleman named Balfour made a declaration for the British government, voicing support for the Zionists. And that started the ball rolling. And things progressed. The horror of World War II showed up, and along with 6 million people of Jewish ancestry, another 7, 8, 9 million people of the wrong political view, sexual orientation, or just happen to be mentally deficient were also executed in the death camps for a grand total of no one's exactly sure because many of the records were destroyed, but 13, 14, 15 million people were done by Hitler and his death camps. Now, that was horrific, but to put it in perspective, it was a horrific time, and this in no way justifies it. But let's not forget that Stalin killed maybe 20 million of his own people in the stalags, the equivalent of the German death camps. Uh, no, he did not restrict it to any one ethnic or religious group. Anybody he didn't like got put away in those camps, and they were death camps. As well, Russia lost 20 million people in World War II. Um, America, the great defender of honesty, truth, and justice and morality, nuked two Japanese cities. Some would argue needlessly. But that's a debate for another thing. It was a horrific time. After the war, the world felt a collective guilt over what had happened to the people of Israel, the Jewish people, and they decided, and it was done as an imperial power would do it for a colony. Britain gave, Britain and France, I think, but we'll stick with Britain just to make it simple for those who don't understand or know. They wrote a paper, and the UN agreed to it, and Israel was given the right to go in and colonize Palestine. And the paper made it pretty close to a 50-50 split. Now, this was amazing because at the time, living in Palestine, the people who were Jewish represented less than 20% of the population. And the people that we now name Palestinians had lived there for centuries. Now, I don't know how long you've got to live someplace to be indigenous, but as the Palestinian people went back close to 2,000 years at least, I think that's got to be close to indigenous. And that started the ball rolling. And by 47, the people that were in charge of Israel either believed that they were in a desperate position and needed to do something, a life or death stand with their back against the water, or they believed they could do it militarily and they simply wanted to take the land. Now, that's a debatable point. But a war started against the Arab people, and nobody's sure who fired the first bullet in that war. It depends on the side and whose paper you're reading. But by the end of that particular outbreak of violence, Israel was occupying, give or take, and I'm doing this from memory, and it's a bad day, so check my numbers. But I'm going to say in round numbers, 80% of Palestine. And since that time, while it hasn't been a straight line, the land grab has continued. And I said the first outbreak of violence, and that's because I see this as one continuous war with occasional outbreaks of ceasefire, not a peace, a ceasefire. And during the ceasefires, both sides would rearm and get more people to have another go at it. Now, the standard version of history for many decades was that Israel was defending herself. It was a needed war, and the Palestinians ran away because they were cowards and weak and pathetic. And the land was miserable and left alone, and they were Palestinians were lazy, and Israel came in and made kibbutzes and turned it into a land of milk and honey and olives and bikinis. And that's one version. Um, the other version is the Arab/Palestinian version. And in their version, terrible atrocities were committed to the Palestinian against the Palestinian people. Villages were plundered, raped, burned, assassinations. It was a guerrilla warfare. Now, England does admit that the King David Hotel was terror bombed by an Israeli group. And at that point, it would be called a terrorist organization if we were using today's language. But Israel used terror tactics. They placed bombs in hotels. They killed innocent people. And that's the British understanding. They were so discouraged at the end of it. And these were people that had stood up to Hitler and saved the world from fascism. Maybe that was why. Maybe they're just too tired, but they threw up their hands and just walked away from Israel and the Palestinians, and that was that for them. Until later when they tried to take the Suez Canal, but that was another disaster. Not for this video, but uh, the Palestinian understanding of what they refer to as the Nakba, and that's probably pronounced badly. Um, and it translates to the great sadness or the terrible times. It depends on whose dictionary you look at. But since that time, outbreaks of ceasefire and outbreaks of violence, there were the rock throwing attempts at liberation. Then there were all sorts of things done by both sides, which is why I say this did not start on October 7th. October 7th, for the record, here we go, so nobody can doubt that I have said it publicly, was a terrorist attack. It was, as all terrorist attacks are, aimed at creating terror in the enemy, and it succeeded. As a strategy, it worked well. The plan, as I understand it, and it makes sense to me, was to try to get Israel to do some horrible thing that would so offend the people that it would bring the Palestinian question back into the forefront of the world opinion and questions and views. And it worked. At this point, it's being watched by the United Nations and UNESCO, and the world is involved in trying to settle this thing. The Hamas decision, what was politically a good one. I think it's got out of hand and they don't know how to end it or they don't want to end it. But they certainly played the Israeli people and the leaders of Israel very well. A terrible act, a wrong act. Women and children and non-combatants should never be part of a war plan, although they have been always, but they never should be. Um, but Israel's gone way over the top. Just consider the numbers involved. The attack on October 7th killed less than 2,000 people and hostages were about 200. So where there were 2,000 people that were taken hostage and or killed, that's a big number. But since then, Israel has placed more than 10,000 people into their jails. Their special jails that are only for Palestinian Israelis, the ones that are never charged and are tortured and die in prison. Um, they have killed more than 40,000 Palestinians. And the claim is that they've managed to kill some of the people that were involved in the October 7th massacre, terror attack. Well, fair enough. I suppose they have. But at this point, out of the 40,000 killed, the best guess estimates is a few thousand Hamas fighters and half a dozen Hamas leaders. 40,000 dead for that's a real bad count of civilian versus participants. Um, and they're not stopping. Israel has now moved their military into the West Bank. They are occupying the West Bank. They have launched a military campaign, an invasion of the West Bank. This is an escalation. Now consider, and this is important for the genocide charge that I believe is accurate, and the United Nations says is very plausible. Israel started by invading northern Gaza. They told the people move to the south. When the people were in the south, they invaded the south. When the people started going back to the north, they invaded the north again. And wherever the people go, they find that Hamas has miraculously arisen there and they have to go and get the people to move. And they are hurting the people. Polio has broken out. Starvation. The plan that is apparent in the Gaza Strip is they go in, they take out all of the infrastructure, they surround hospitals and destroy hospitals, and they destroy medical facilities. So there's no health care, there's no infrastructure, which means no water. They already had cut off most of the water and most of the electricity in the 17-year siege that they've been doing. And now they have moved into Gaza or to West Bank, and they're doing the same thing. They're surrounding the medical facilities. They are destroying them. They are wiping out villages. They are arming the civilian terrorists that call themselves Israelis or Zionists. And it is escalating. And they keep hurting and moving the people. The problem is that none of the Arab countries that surround uh, Israel and the Gaza Strip are willing to accept the Palestinian people. Perhaps it's because they don't like them, or perhaps it's because they see another Nakba. And they know that if they let the Palestinian people come out of Gaza Strip, the Israelis will never let them back in. And that's why I think there's genocide going on. They have been starving the people. They have wiped out the medical facilities. They've broken the infrastructure, and they are hurting the people around. They're putting them into safe zones, which are much more akin to being a dartboard that they get to concentrate the people in and then bomb and kill them. And there is some debate about the actual numbers of dead and wounded. Um, the UN number is a little more than 40,000 killed. Out of that 40,000, maybe 30,000 are women and children, and maybe 35, 36,000 are non-combatants, giving a really nasty number of civilian and children and women killed by the IDF. Now, you can't see it, but Rusty's got his nose on me. He's trying to get me to take him outside. All I can say, and I'm going to at this point really get people's hackles up. So if your hackles are twitching, it's going to get worse. I draw a distinction between Zionist, a person of Jewish descent, and a person of Jewish faith. Those are three very distinct groups. And a Zionist is uh, anyone, Jewish or non-Jewish, Christian or non-Christian, who happens to believe that there is legitimate reasons for the Jewish people to occupy Palestine. To put it bluntly and easily, succinctly, they may dress it up by saying, "Oh, it was given to them by God and they deserve to be there." But if you read the Bible, that's not true. Uh, the Hebrew sacred scriptures talk of a time, and you look it up. I'm not going to give references. You just read your Bible if you're their Bible, if it's not your Bible. And you will find that God says to Moses, you got to go there and they're going to get into this land and it's there for the taking. But you're going to have to kill the people that already live there. So they got to fight for it. And God gives them a warning. And then God says to them, and by the way, you'd best follow the covenant that we're making, because if you don't, the very land itself will vomit you out like it is vomiting out the people that are there now. And he calls on the earth and the rocks and the rivers and the streams and the stars to witness the covenant. So it was not given to them saying, go in and walk in. Was it promised to them? Conditionally, yes. Did they get thrown out of it? Yes. Maybe they broke the covenant. What do I know? I don't particularly believe that story. I think it's mythology, but it tells an honest story of a group of people coming out of Egypt who had spent a long time in the desert and had become incredibly tough and hard and strong. And they ran over these people that were farmers and city dwellers and raped, pillaged, and plundered and burned their way across the whole land. And it became theirs because they had killed and raped and plundered to get it. That's the story in the sacred scriptures. You can pretty it up all you want, but that's the basic outline. And then comes uh, the second war against the Romans. And the Romans come in and destroy the temple, and the Jewish people go into diaspora. And they're wandering around until Britain and the Zionist movement combine to start the whole process that we're living with now. And at this point, I beg the good people in Israel, the people of good faith, the people of good heart, of kindness, justice, mercy, humility, who follow their sacred scriptures. It's time to end this madness. You cannot defeat a belief. People have tried for centuries to wipe out various beliefs. The Reformation created many wars in many countries between Protestants and Catholics, and now, except for maybe the Vatican, most countries are multi-faith because they have given up on that, which makes Israel, the nation of Israel, an outlier. Um, it's time to realize you can't make friends by killing them. Every time the IDF kills one Palestinian, I'm going to pick a number here. I'm going to say 10 more Palestinians join the cause. And those that were already leaning towards the cause, they pick up a rifle now. And if you give anybody, any people, no choice other than death or death, most of the time they choose death standing on their feet instead of sitting or kneeling on their knees. It just feels better to die fighting, most people find. And Israel, the Zionists within you, the warmongers, are giving the Palestinians no choice, and they will die standing up, or they will die running through the tunnels so they can pop up and shoot Israelis. And think about something here, Israel, because your own government, your own people have been lying to you big time. This whole thing started off on October 7th when the Israeli government, Netanyahu, and read Gulliver's Travels to see why I emphasized the last part of his name, uh, declared an existential threat to Israel. This threat was posed by 30,000 Hamas fighters that were backed by Iran. And that's my dog in the background. Those 30,000 fighters had not been killed yet. They haven't been stopped. The IDF goes in, clears the zone, and a month later they come back and re-clear it. It's been almost a year now, and the might of the Israeli IDF has not been able to militarily defeat the Hamas freedom fighters. Something's gone wrong with the war, folks. You're not winning it. At best, you've got a stalemate. And that's a fact. Look at it. How come? What's going on? Not only have you not been able to defeat militarily the people in the Gaza Strip, you're now going head to head and toe to toe in a standoff with Lebanon, with the Houthis, with Syria. You've got a whole bunch of people getting very ready to come in and stomp on you because they're seeing your weakness. A few months ago, Iran launched a night missile attack, first one directly from Iran territory ever, against Israel. And everybody yelled and cheered and said, "Look, we stopped them with our Iron Dome." No, you didn't. You, America, France, Britain, and a couple of Arab countries managed to stop almost all of them. But the fact is, Israel couldn't do it on their own. Without America and the other countries, you wouldn't have stopped them. They would have got through. And these were not state of the art number one on the lineup missiles. These were old drones and missiles and stuff that they had sitting around that they wanted to get rid of anyway. And they even told you when they were coming and from what altitude and at what time. I mean, they told you all that stuff. And even so, you needed the help of outsiders to stop it. You're not winning the war. So, to the good people of Israel, not the pacifists and not the ones who are against the government, but the people of good heart. And that can include pacifists, and that can include people who want to get the rest of the hostages back and the people that don't like the government, but the people of good heart who are trying to be righteous Jews, who follow their faith and realize that you've got to do justice, offer mercy, and walk humbly with your God. It's time for you to step up, to find a way to force your government to come to terms with the Palestinians. And if you cannot get them to come to terms, it's time to vote them out of office. It really is. This needs to stop. The shame being brought on the Jewish people will never go away. Uh, and the honor being brought to the Palestinians will never leave, or it might, but it'll last a long time. You have lost a publicity war, and you have lost the actual war. It's time to become peacemakers. That's my plea. Toss out the Zionist movement. Become family again with your Arab brothers and sisters. Live in peace. Live in shalom. Live the way God wants you to. And that's in peace, in justice, in mercy, and humility. Look up your prophets. It's in your holy text. In particular, Micah. And I think that's where I'll end this. I'm going to have to get this out on the web, and that's going to take a time. And realize I made the distinction between Zionists, people of Jewish ancestry, and people of Jewish faith. I don't believe that I am, at this point, an anti-Semite. I'm certainly an anti-Zionist. Y'all figure out if I make any sense. And if I do, think about it. And if I don't, throw me out and never watch me again or read my stuff. Anyway, it's your choice, but I hope you'll make the choice for peace. And at that, this Zoom is over. Bye-bye. Not Zoom. Make that just a recording done on Zoom. Now it's bye-bye.